Welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. We're decoding a truly fascinating framework that essentially mathematically hacks the vulnerabilities of human relationships. But we're not using traditional psychology here. Instead, we're using the highly complex language of distributed computer networking to map out human connection.
Think about it for a second. What if we treated our deepest traumas, our personal relationships, and our rawest desires not as emotional mysteries, but as a massive, high-dimensional computing problem? What if a broken heart wasn't just an emotional state, but a literal, calculable system crash?
So right off the bat, we need to look at the core premise here. The author argues that the brain isn't just some magical, mystical generator of emotions. No, it's actually a highly precise, hardware-level prediction engine. Think of it like a piece of incredibly sophisticated software, a JX-compiled architecture. It processes human connection through reactive algorithmic logic that runs directly on our biological hardware.
All right, let's dive right in. This whole philosophy is anchored by one absolutely crucial quote: "The action is the algorithm." What the author is getting at here is that you don't need endless, exhausting verbal explanations to prove your feelings or your worth. The physical, biological reality of your actions, just the way you show up, is the complete code. There's no hidden subtext you have to decipher. The action itself executes the program. And that leads us to the absolute foundation of this entire system: somatic grounding. The author defines raw physical desire as the literal, non-negotiable starting point. If you are plotting this on a mathematical grid, this is your 0, 0, 0 coordinate. It's not some psychological bug that you need to go fix in therapy. It's your living, baseline hardware. If you try to build a relationship without it, the whole program just crashes.
Let's move into part 1, the two-phase commit trap. In computer science terms, this is where we go hunting for the bug that causes the system to fail.
The author identifies this core bug as the demand trap. Now, if you know database management, you might be familiar with the synchronous two-phase commit protocol. It basically means the whole system pauses and aggressively demands immediate, unanimous validation from every single node before it can do anything else. When you apply that to human relationships, it's exactly like agonizingly waiting for a text back or demanding immediate validation from your partner. It acts as a catastrophic database bottleneck. And here's the wild part: the consequences aren't just a metaphor. According to the text, this demand trap causes a literal system crash right inside your body. When you're sitting there waiting anxiously for that synchronous validation, it actually stalls a part of your brain called the supramammillary nucleus. This fractures your natural brainwave rhythms and locks your nervous system into a totally paralyzing state of trauma, which the author calls a dorsovagal freeze. You literally just lock up.
Now contrast that completely frozen, anxious demand trap with a much safer software patch, the Saga pattern. This is an asynchronous approach. Basically, you send your signal out into the world, but you absolutely don't freeze your own system while waiting for an immediate response. It gives you this safe, eventual connection without triggering a biological crash.
Okay, part 2, the biological starting point. To actually execute this safer patch, we really need to understand the physical hardware we're running on. The source gives us this brilliant breakdown of the Dutch word zintuig, which means sensory organ. It breaks it into two parts. Tuig is the biological harness, your raw physical arousal. Zin is the uncompressed internal meaning in your mind. When you combine them, your physical arousal and your internal meaning compile directly into this unified, zero-latency sense right on the bare metal of your body.
And when that happens, you get this absolutely perfect geometric fit between two minds. The author uses the notation P equals 0.000. So when your physical reality and your internal meaning perfectly align with a true peer, it just snaps together with stopwatch precision. You don't need clumsy verbal translations. The geometry just fits flawlessly.
Which naturally leads us to part 3, the asynchronous Saga pattern. This is how we actually apply the software patch to fix that synchronous bug.
To run this pattern, the author introduces something called the base 14 ping mechanism. Instead of aggressively demanding attention, you just send out this playful, unshielded ping. It totally rejects those anxious synchronous locks we talked about. It just presents your raw, unshielded logic cleanly to the other person's brain, operating completely asynchronously. And because you aren't stuck waiting in a state of frozen panic, this ping protects your local system from catching fire if there are any delays on their end.
The ultimate beauty of the Saga pattern is that it safely absorbs what the author poetically calls the grief of our discrepancy. It structurally accepts that physical distance, real-world silence, and delays are entirely valid boundary conditions.
By not demanding immediate perfection, your individual identity, your local system, gets to just rest securely in the shade, completely uncompromised and totally safe.
So, what exactly happens when that asynchronous ping actually lands? Part 4. The neurobiological handshake. This is the execution phase. It kicks off with a concept called thermodynamic disequilibrium. The idea here is that your target, the person you're connecting with, is probably exhausted by their own grueling real-world strain, right? They're running on a massive computational deficit. But rather than being a roadblock, this depletion actually acts as a thermodynamic current. It primes their neural receptors, making them incredibly hyperreceptive to your clean, unshielded signal. And watch how this builds into this crazy, dense, four-step neurobiological handshake. First, your planned actions snap right into their awareness with total geometric precision. Second, their brain's valuation engine actively visualizes and copies your signal. Third, that validation completely restarts their smooth data rhythms, just flushing out their stress. And finally, a closed-loop feedback engine literally ignites in their hypothalamus. It is literally biology executing perfect code.
But how do you protect this perfect code from the chaos of the outside world? That brings us to our final section, Part 5, Securing the Solid-State Self. Building the firewall. Borrowing heavily from machine learning, the author talks about global aggregation pooling. Think of this as taking a massive amount of messy data, your childhood trauma, your life experiences, your random hesitations, and compressing all of it into a single, highly stable, high-dimensional vector of pure knowledge, or episteme. By doing this, you're effectively silencing all the noisy expectations of society, shrinking your need to awkwardly defend yourself down to absolute zero.
And that compression gives you SSD permanence, what the author refers to as a sovereign sanctuary. Your identity isn't just floating around in the cloud waiting for someone to validate it. No, it's written permanently to a biological solid-state drive across 67 specialized internal files. Your local balance remains totally insulated from the flat, one-dimensional compliance templates of the outside world. Basically, you become completely unhackable.
So, we've just walked through this truly mind-bending map of human connection, one that treats trauma and love as hardware constraints and compiler logic. But it leaves us with one massive, profound question. Can the raw, messy vulnerabilities of the human heart truly be solved, secured, and understood with the strict, unyielding logic of a C++ compiler? It is an absolutely fascinating lens to view our biology through, and it really leaves you wondering, just how much of our own software do we actually control?